Welcome to the Truth and Liberty broadcast. We believe we have a mandate to bring godly change to our nation and the world through the 7 spheres or mountains of influence. To further this cause, we give away a product every week that will empower you to get involved in changing your life and changing our world. You can register for our weekly giveaway by subscribing at truthandliberty.net. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to receive weekly updates on guests, news, and much more. This is an interactive live cast, and we welcome your questions. To ask a question during the live cast, use the comment or chat features. Now get ready to dive into this week's topics with our hosts on location in Colorado, USA.
Hello and welcome to our Monday Night Truth and Liberty broadcast. I've got Richard Harris here with me. He's the Chief Counsel for our Truth and Liberty, which is a 501c4. We are actually able to lobby or do any of those things. We talk about politics and whatever it needs to do. And tonight we have a great guest with us, former Congressman Bob McEwen, and he's been with us a number of times. I'll give him a little better introduction here in a few minutes. But you know, we are continuing to broadcast all through this coronavirus. For those of you watching, we are in 100% compliance with what they've instructed us to do. The emergency management people have come in, and our ministry has cooperated with them so much that they have given us freedom to do things like this, considering it essential. We actually have no more than 8% of our employees on site at any one time, and we have spent a lot of money to make it so that our employees can work from home. 600 plus employees working from home, and everyone is staying employed, and even the people who are part-time and aren't working, we're paying them what they normally would have averaged. So we're going to keep paying them and blessing them. And anyway, we're glad that you're with us, and we're going to have a great time tonight. For those of you who don't know former Congressman Bob McEwen, I tell you, he is a blessing. I have recommended his teaching on politics, easy as pie to, who knows, hundreds, thousands of people. It's great. So anyway, we're going to have a great time. But first of all, we need you to get involved, and we want you to be a part of this. And so Richard is going to tell you how you can participate and actually ask questions of us or Congressman McEwen.
Amen. Well, thank you, Andrew. It's such an honor to be here, and really looking forward to tonight's live cast with Congressman McEwen. I hope you can grab some family or friends and get around the computer or the TV and listen to tonight's live cast. I think it's going to be really educational. You know, Andrew said it's an interactive process, and it is. We want you involved tonight. So whether you're watching on our website or on Facebook, you can post your comments or your questions there, and we encourage you to do that, and we'll do our very best to get to those later on in the broadcast. Speaking of our website, it's truthandliberty.net. If you're watching by Facebook, that's fine, but your experience will be better if you switch over to our website where it won't get censored, because that does happen sometimes where Facebook just mysteriously drops us. But watch on our website. And on our website, we have a host of resources for you. One of the main purposes of Truth and Liberty is to equip the church to get involved, to make a difference. Toward that end, we have all kinds of stuff on there, like how to find your congressman, how to register to vote, articles on different subjects, like how do parents deal with this whole LGBT thing. One of the best resources that I know of, and that we have a link for on our website, is Congressman McEwen's DVD. It's called Politics Easy as Pie, that Andrew mentioned. It is the best, most concise explanation of why government spending on welfare and things like that is actually wasteful.
So that's on our website?
There's a link for it, yes, sir.
That's awesome. That just increased the value of our website exponentially. That's a great thing.
We have Congressman McEwen come teach in the Practical Government School because this is such excellent.
And I heard that he was teaching, what, 2 or 3 hours today?
Yeah, he taught today. So.
And we're doing all of this by live stream or video, I guess.
Yes.
I don't know how we're doing it, but
Zoom, I think.
All right. Anyway, what a blessing.
But check out our website. We have a 24/7 news feed on there where we pull from all of our favorite conservative, reliable news sources, so you don't have to go anywhere else to get your news. There's a lot of great things coming up here at Andrew Wommack Ministries I wanted to mention to you. Now, Campus Days, which was scheduled for here in a couple weeks, got postponed.
We might as well call time out on all of this stuff and just say that it's in limbo.
Everything's in limbo.
Rather than announce it, because we've had to change so much and cancel so many of our things. I don't know.
Well, that's coming from the top, folks.
There you go. So I just made a 50,000 pound payment on a facility over in England, and it looks like that they aren't going to allow me to hold my meeting. And so we contacted them, and they aren't going to refund any of the money. So that's probably $60,000 that I lost right there.
Well, I believe God will return it to you.
Amen. We're going to make it.
Well, I hope that you don't have to cancel this Don't Limit God conference. It's set for April 30th and May 1st. Hopefully this will all be lifted by then.
Well, they just extended today to the end of April. April the 30th is when they are putting all these restrictions in place.
Well, you guys should do it by live stream then.
So anyway, let's skip all of that stuff. I don't even want to talk about it.
Let's talk about our giveaway then.
All right.
Okay, so every week on Truth and Liberty, we give one of Andrew's products away, and you can be eligible for that by subscribing to Truth and Liberty. So on our website, you'll see a button there that says subscribe, and if you'll click that and give us your email, then you'll get our weekly email, which gives you lots of good information and lets you know what's going on here at Truth and Liberty, and you'll be eligible to receive a product. Last week, we gave away Sharper Than Any Two-Edged Sword, one of Andrew's great books, and Judy Ransom. Congratulations on that, Judy. This week we're offering A Better Way to Pray by Andrew Wommack. This is a phenomenal book. I love the opening concept of it, which is that hypocrites love to pray. Yeah. Coming right out of Scripture. I bet you didn't know Jesus said that, but he did. And this is a phenomenal book. It's actually will revolutionize your relationship with God, and I guarantee you that. So subscribe today. We talked about how to interact. Let me mention how to become a member of our coalition. Andrew mentioned it, but we're a 501c4 organization. We depend on the generosity of our supporters, and you can become a member today by, again, going to our website, going to the donate section, and just signing up to donate on a monthly basis, recurring giving of at least $5 a month. And if you'll do that, you'll be one of our members and help us take a stand in our culture for biblical worldview and biblical righteousness. And last, if you need prayer tonight, I know there's a lot of people out there that are confused. Some people are scared. Maybe some people are sick, but if you need prayer, we have trained prayer ministers standing by to agree with you in faith according to God's Word, and you can call in 719-635-1111. So I hope you'll take advantage of that.
And let me mention, Richard, that we've now expanded those hours, so it's 24 hours a day, 5 days a week. We take the weekend off, but you'll be able to call regardless of what time you're seeing this and get someone, and we would love to pray with you.
Amen.
You know, last week when the governor gave this order to stay at home, we didn't have our system completely so that we could do it from home, and so we canceled all of the customer service calls where they were ordering product and only took prayer calls. And on Thursday and Friday, we took over 2,000 prayer calls, even operating on a limited schedule, but we were able to pray with 2,000 people. So that was awesome. And now we're back up to receiving over 2,000 calls a day.
Praise God.
That's awesome. So anyway, Congressman Bob McEwen is with us. He is the Executive Director of the Council for National Policy. This is a nonprofit that deals with education and strong national defense, government, and Western values. And anyway, he's got a resume that's a lot longer than I got time to give. But let me just say that we've had him with us a number of times, and Congressman, I just love your ministry and the way that you express things. You make politics easy as pie. It's awesome.
Well, Andrew, thank you. You and Richard are heroes of mine. I appreciate what you're doing. What you just said there about when you had to limit the phone calls, you got an option as to helping people or taking orders. And I think almost anyone would think, well, I need to get the financial support, so I'll continue to do that. But what you said is, no, we'll put that aside. We'll be able to take the prayer calls. And that's just sort of a thumbnail observation of your ministry. And as I say, I'm a fan.
So Congressman, it's obvious that you've been in politics and you understand that realm more than I do or most of my listeners. But you deal with a lot of things. Like I know when you've come to our place, you really present socialism and capitalism and contrast the two, which we have a great ignorance about this, especially among the younger people. And I think I've seen a statistic that over 50% of the young people would be willing to embrace socialism, and they don't even realize what they're talking about. That's one of your strengths, is dealing with this.
Well, just think, it's been over 30 years. Now, the wall went up in 1961, And so then so the wall in Berlin was up for 30 years. And then when it came down, it's been 30 years since then. Wow. And so we have people that don't remember what socialism and communism is like. They don't know about the gulags. They don't know the 85 million that Stalin and the Russians killed, and the 60 to 100 million that Mao Zedong killed, and the 2.5 million that Pol Pot killed in Cambodia just because people could wear glasses or owned a foreign car or could speak a foreign language. And of course, I had a fraternity brother who hid behind a couch and watched his father get riddled with bullets and drug out by the heels when Castro took over in Cuba. And so they don't understand what it's like when government comes in and tells you what you can do and what you can't do, number one, and if you step out of line, what they do to you. You know, just take Mexico. You and I, if we were to go to Mexico today, we couldn't go in the trucking business. We couldn't go in the telephone business. We couldn't go in the oil business. We couldn't go in the pipe. All of those things are controlled by very rich people who have an agreement and a deal with the government, and that's called socialism. That's government control of the tools of production. So if you're a poor person, a talented person in Mexico, you have no hope of growing up and going into business. And so you want to escape that because you are locked into poverty. There's nothing you can do about it. Under free enterprise, you can float into the harbor in Los Angeles at 8 in the morning, and you can own 3 7-Elevens by midnight because in America, you're allowed to go into business for yourself, and therefore that gives you freedom. And young people that look at where the poverty is and where the control is, and to say we want to bring that here, there is only one excuse for that, and that just has to be ignorance.
Yeah. You know, I saw a thing on the news today, and they were interviewing truckers. And truckers were talking about how they are increasing their hours. They were saying, we will keep everything stocked. They are, many of them, being exposed to the virus. And I was just sitting there thinking that this is capitalism at work. And yet some people have actually mentioned that we ought to nationalize trucking and all of these things in the hospitals and use this crisis as an opportunity to turn it into national health care. What's your opinion on all of that?
Well, let's say about the truckers. Truckers are modern day cowboys. A cowboy went out and slept under the sun, and he moved the cows around and was his own boss and got up when he wanted to, went to bed when he wanted to, and was alone a lot of the time. And that's what truckers are. They move people back and forth. The Interstate Commerce Commission used to control how much they could carry and where and when. You had to get a license to move something from Illinois to Los Angeles. And if you didn't have that permit, you couldn't do it. Ronald Reagan got rid of the Interstate Commerce Commission, allowed people just to do what they want. And it totally collapsed the cost of transportation, which may reduce the cost of everything, and is estimated to be 1 to 3% of the gross domestic product growth during the 1980s when that happened. So they're good people, like you said. And so the idea that government trying to run things, all you have to do is to go to the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, and you go in there and they give you a number and say, take a seat and we'll be with you in a month. And to think that those people, to turn our healthcare system over to those folks, and that's the way it is in the rest of the world. Let's take Britain. Britain, they sit down with the health minister and they say, here's how much money you have. And so they have to calculate how many appendectomies can we do, and how many the various services. And then when they see that the numbers are greater than the supply, then they adjust it. And so they say that if you're this year over 55, then you cannot get dialysis because that's all the money that they have. Now you don't have to pay for it. Of course, you get it for free. But if you're 65, you get it zero for free, and you die. And so that we don't think that's a good program. No. We like the capacity to help and preserve life, which is what America is all about. And so we have the finest healthcare system in the world. We have a messed up pricing system. That's because the government's involved. We can fix that. But the last thing we want to do is to turn over to a bunch of bureaucrats, the people that tell you whether or not you can save your daughter's life, or you can save your mother's life, or whether or not you are worth saving. And that's when government controls the healthcare system. And that's what the competition is between you making those decisions in a free market, or whether or not government's going to make them on your behalf.
Well, and speaking of telling people that they can't get care, I've read that in Italy, where the coronavirus is really bad, that the hospitals were turning away the elderly, the people the most vulnerable, because they had the least chance of survival. And they have a socialized medical. That's socialized medicine, yeah.
And I heard somebody just today say that we can't go to national socialized medicine, or all of the people in Canada and England won't have anywhere to go to get treatment.
All of the wealthy people in the world. That's
right.
If you're a sheikh with a private 747 in Saudi Arabia and you want health care, where do you come? You come to them. If you're the sister of the Prime Minister of Canada, that means you get to go to the head of the line, because you know the people important, and you want to have a heart bypass, where you go to the Cleveland Clinic.
Yeah.
And then again, when the government controls it, what they do is that they tell doctors how much they can serve. And when they reach that limit, then they can't get paid anymore. And so you go to Florida in November and December, and it is filled with doctors from Canada who have reached their limit. And I just saw the other day that it's a 5-month wait to get in to see a physician. Well, if you've got cancer and you got 5 months to see the primary doctor, and then another 5 to 6, 8, or 10 months to see the specialist, then you'll understand that there'll be far less survival. And then if you're a socialist, you can say, look, in Canada, they pay less for their health care. You betcha.
It's because it's not worth anything.
Yeah.
In Angola, they pay less for the air conditioning, too, because they don't have any.
That's right.
Yeah, you understand.
And you know, Bob, there's some people thinking, well, you know, you guys are just ragging on this system, but they still see it as good. But I go to England at least twice a year, and I have I've been doing this for 3 decades. I have never been there that there hasn't been on the news about somebody who the National Healthcare Service deemed not worthy of saving their life because their resources were stretched too thin or something. And so they go to the public asking for free gifts so that they can go get their health care outside of the thing. And I mean, that has happened dozens and dozens of times. I've been into the hospitals there, and I mean, they remind me of what the hospitals in Da Nang when I was in Vietnam.
Wow.
They aren't even close to the quality that we have here, and that's nationalized health care.
Or nationalized anything. You go to the average government building, look at the condition of the government building, look at the halls versus a private building where they're competing for customers. Government, as they say, nobody ever waxes a rented car. So nobody takes care of things that they don't own. And when they don't own it, they don't care what happens to it. And as a result, you get less service. When a person's rewarded for doing good things for people, like you are under free enterprise, then you figure out ways how to get a new thing. Look what's happening right now, where Battelle Institute figured out that there was a shortage of these masks. And so they developed an idea just in the last week that was approved today by the president, whereby you can reuse the masks, that you can sterilize them so that they can be used over and over. Other people, talking to Mike Lindell just earlier today, and he's converting his pillow factory into making masks because they said there was a shortage. They're making 10,000 a day, and he said by Friday they'll be making 50,000 a day. Now, in government, they would have to study it, think about it, and then almost start to do it over 2 to 3 years. They don't. Why did these people do it? Because under free enterprise, you're rewarded for doing good things for people. Under government, there's no reward. Subsequently, they're always behind. And the more socialism they have, the more poverty there is.
And you know, we've got a real push for socialism in this country. And I'm of the opinion that if Trump hadn't have been president, that we would have been in socialized medicine after this crisis. They would have nationalized it. They would have rammed something through. Pelosi was trying to put all kinds of things into this stimulus package. What's your opinion on that? Is that out in left field, or is there that kind of a push in this nation?
They have a belief that you never let a crisis go to waste. And so when they wanted to increase the unemployment compensation for those that, when you actually tell people they can't go to work and they shut down factories and they get unemployment, well, there's not enough in those funds in the various states to survive. And so the president approved the federal government assisting states to do that. And he was excited about it, and they were ready to pass it. But Pelosi flew back in from California and said, no. I want money for Planned Parenthood. I want $75 million for the PBS and for the endowment for the arts. The list goes on and on, so that there's as much money. Now, the president fought and kicked and howled. He didn't get any money for Planned Parenthood, and he was able to cut the amount going to the Kennedy Center from 35 million to 25 million, and they cut the amount of money going to the National Endowment for the Arts. They were going to give them another 75 million, and they cut that in half, and National Endowments for the Humanities. He went all the through, but after doing it, half of the cost of that bill was to buy off the Democrat liberals for their special privileges of what they wanted to do, which didn't go to the working people. So you understand that's the difference. Some people love government, which is an opportunity to take from people's pockets. If you're in free enterprise, if you're running a company, you're selling cars or selling suits or selling shoes, you have to have a good product because people voluntarily reach in their pocket and give it to you. It's a whale of a lot easier if you could just use the government to reach in their pocket and take it. And that's what socialists want to do, and that's what socialism is around the globe.
I tell you, things like that just make me mad. And I think that the public ought to be mad that they are taking advantage of this crisis and trying to run their pet things that they've been unable to do for 3 years and take advantage of a crisis and do it on the backs of the working people. So I don't understand why there isn't a rebellion against the Democrats and against this socialism. Do you think that that's going to happen in the 2020 elections, or do you think they can actually get by with this stuff?
Well, you have to be knowledgeable. You have to be aware. So you have to be able to follow it. And so certainly the people that are watching your program are the above average people that care about their country and where they're headed. But a lot of people on the street, they're just willing to vote for whoever's going to promise them the most. But I do seriously feel that the country is in the process of making a great turning. And that is that they're about to undo, with his leadership, with the president's leadership, that everything, in my opinion, that has gone wrong in our country, whether it be homelessness. As you know, for 200 years, we never had homeless people living on the street. Homelessness, whether it be taking the Bible out of the schools, whether it be taking the 10 Commandments off of the walls, whether it be defining marriage as 3 men and 2 women down the street. All of these things, taking innocent life, all of these things came not from the legislatures, they came from the courts. And we have not had a president that systematically went about appointing people that would stand on the courts that were committed to biblical standards. Now, what's the best way to find that out? That is, how do they stand on life? Because life comes from God and comes from the scriptures. When you do away with man, there's no protection for life. So as Thomas Jefferson said, the God who gave us life gave us liberty at the same time. They're tied. This president is committed to appointing the men and women to the bench that are committed to turning America. There's nothing in the Constitution that says you can't have 10 commandments on the wall. But that's the reason that we have magnetometers in the doors, because we have said that thou shalt not kill. We took it down. And that's why everybody has to have locks on their bicycles, because we took down thou shalt not steal. And so all of the things that have gone haywire has come through the courts. And this president, unlike any president we've ever had, is committed to systematically, person by person, make appointments to be able to go back to biblical values that built our nation and undo the chaos that we have. So the bottom line, if I can just quickly say, I truly believe I am more optimistic now than I ever have been. Because we've tried their way. We took the most beautiful cities, alabaster cities gleaming, and they've turned them into places you don't even want to drive through, let alone live in. So they can't lecture about how in 1960s, so I remember this is the richest nation. We ought to be able to do these other things. Well, they did those other things, and we saw what the consequence is. The collapse of the black family and the poverty that goes with it, and the crime that riddles our states and cities. And so now they can't boast. They don't talk about what they're going to do. The only thing they do is scream names, call people names. They call them racist and call it. They never say, when I'm going to take over Los Angeles, I'm going to leave people on the street defecating on themselves and making sure people are poor, and the signs on the streets in Los Angeles are faded and worn out, even though it has the fifth largest economy in the world, but they can't even meet their basic bill. They don't brag about that. Nope. They just call their call their opponents names. Well, I think that we're on the threshold of people getting fed up with it, and I am optimistic that we're going to turn this thing around, as we have seen take place in just these last few months.
Amen.
Amen.
Man, that's good preaching.
That's good.
Hey, let me ask you this. I know that you know the president personally. I was with you one time when I think you had just had lunch with him, I think the day before or the week before or something. And I would be interested in you sharing your perspective, how President Trump handles all of this criticism. I'm not sure that I could handle that. I don't know anybody that could take the abuse that he gets, and he seems to like it. What's your opinion here?
All day, every day. It is phenomenal. It's not just opposition. I mean, it is direct personal abuse and attack day after day after day. We saw what the things that the Speaker Pelosi said this morning, and said that he's responsible for people's lives, that he has blood on his hands, and that he's fiddled with people, and just on and on, day after day that they do that. So the scripture says we're to pray for those in authority over us, and I'm telling you, we need to pray for him, because there's no two like him. But if you want to describe as to what the country wanted, let me just take a couple of minutes and see if I can quickly do that. And that is that never in the history of America have we ever had a president, a chief leader, that had not been a political leader or commanded troops in the field. So you have George Washington, the Revolutionary War, Zachary Taylor, the Mexican War, Ulysses Grant, the Civil War, and Dwight Eisenhower, World War II. So they became president, but they had been a commander in the field, and those skills are very similar. That is, you have to get people to voluntarily work together for the common good. That's what a general does, and that's what a politician does. And that's what we've always had. Until this man, who is an entrepreneur. Now, an entrepreneur is the exact opposite of all of that. It's 180 degrees different. That is, an entrepreneur says, look, it's my money, it's my name, it's my reputation, it's my name on the building. You're going to do it my way because I'm responsible for it. And if you don't like it, I'll get somebody who will. Now, I repeat, that's never happened before, and it will never happen again. But the country was so fed up with having political leaders that when you watch the debate and you have those little dials, that as Jeb Bush or Rick Perry would begin to say, as governor of Texas, I've done this and I've done that, the dials would tend to go down. That the more experience a person had and the more political that they had, the people did not want that. They wanted somebody who said, I don't care about all that. I'm going to get the job done. I'm going to turn the tables over. And so they chose someone who has the political skills of a bull in a china shop. And that is, they wanted somebody. And so let me just tell you about it. I just listened the other day to a speech in 1975 that Ronald Reagan gave, in which he was talking about the fact that you can calculate the number of deaths in America because the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, would not approve drugs that have been approved elsewhere around the world. And so if you were wealthy, you could go buy them elsewhere, but the FDA would not approve them. They'd wait for 8, 10, 15 years to make sure they were safe elsewhere, then they would approve them here. And so government was standing in the way, and he fought to change that. Everybody has fought to change that. And so about 3 weeks ago, the FDA said that nobody could test for this virus except them. Now stop and think about that. The FDA told all the local labs, all the state labs, all the state health companies that you cannot test for this coronavirus. Well, their test that they came up with didn't work. And Donald Trump, if you recall, about 3 weeks ago, he physically went over to the FDA and said, this is going to stop. And the next day, they sent out the word to every state healthcare system, you can develop any test that you want, have at it. And so they systematically, he's ripped it apart as only a businessman would. And now we see that's happening. Now people are finding solutions. He just told about one today where you can test and find out within 5 to 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. We mentioned about Battelle with the mask. They just invented that last week. And at 1 o'clock on Sunday morning, at Saturday night, they said that they could use it, but they could only use it under a certain circumstance. And Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio, called Donald Trump. Donald Trump called the head of the FDA into the office, and on Monday, that's today, On Monday, they said you could proceed. Now, that's what America wanted. They didn't want a diplomat. It didn't want a politician. He wanted somebody to speak on our behalf and get the job done. And as a result, it's just like when somebody goes around for 20 years and tell you this can't be done, this can't be done, and some kid walks in and 15 minutes does it, then what does that do? That makes everybody else mad. And so all of the professionals in Washington are just up in a heap because he does more in a day than they've done in a lifetime.
Well, I agree 100%. Praise God that Trump is our president instead of some other person I could mention.
Well, one of the greatest things he's done is to cut federal regulations. I don't remember the numbers on it, but I think it was for every new regulation the Trump administration was repealing at least 2 or 3.
Well, that was the promise.
Was their instruction.
That was the promise, but I think he went way beyond that. Wasn't it closer to 20 or 30?
Everybody, that was the instruction to every cabinet member, that before you come up with a new regulation, you got to go back and find 2 of them that are obsolete and get rid of them. And it's now an average of 22 regulations have been repealed for every new regulation that's come in. And I'll just say that, he has significant gifts. And one of my best friends in the world is Mike Huckabee. And Mike would tell about that during these debates. He said he and Rick Perry would stand there on the stage and they'd do jumping jacks. They're just waving our and nobody paid any attention. Everybody's looking Trump. And so he has the capacity to attract supporters who appreciate him and love him. But then all great leaders, whether it be Andrew Jackson or Abraham Lincoln or Franklin Roosevelt, great leaders have dedicated supporters, but then they have vicious enemies, and he qualifies for that.
So, Bob, I'd like to get your opinion. I know that nobody was prepared for this. I'm sure that there's going to be things we could learn, we could do better, but what is your opinion of how Trump has managed this virus and stuff? What's the overall opinion of what kind of a job he's doing?
Well, I think he's doing everything that can be done. The first thing, you need to find out how many are vulnerable. So if a person is at risk or not at risk, once you recognize that they have it, then you need to quarantine them right away. How do you do that? You have to have a test. Well, we didn't have a test. And I just described to you how they took 2.5 weeks trying to come up with one until once he discovered what the problem was, he fixed it in 24 hours. Now, everybody else, nobody's ever done that before. And so that's why they were under Obama, we were into the epidemic for 6 months. And it wasn't until after it passed already 1,000 deaths that he recognized it as an emergency. So Trump jumped in immediately. He began to use his leadership skills to say that other people can develop the test. Now we need a solution. And as people have come up with these various solutions, he has brought them to the fore. And the one that they're testing in New York, they believe that using that one against malaria, it kills this virus. And if so, we're going to be able to knock this thing in the head, hopefully. But that would have never happened. It would have been 2 or 3 years down the road before everybody got around to it. Some of the models that they're using, where they said that millions of people were going to die, I got a call from a strategy firm in Los Angeles, in San Diego. And he said, that's what we do for a living. And we believe that they're wrong. And what we would like to do is submit our findings to the White House and let them look at it for a week or 2. Let's see what we're doing, what other people are doing, and let them decide. And that was on Saturday. I sent an email to the White House, and I got a text back from him this morning saying that this afternoon he was going to be on the phone, that they were going to arrange that. Now, that leadership always filters down from the top. It never bubbles up from the bottom. And so as these people begin to respond, it's because the person in charge reacts that way. And so what we're seeing is that in this difficult time, which has shut down the economy of many, many countries, and we're going through something we've never gone through before, but there's hopefulness in that people are in charge. There's a comfort level that comes when you're dealing with a doctor that knows what he's doing. And there's a sense that this is being observed by people who know what they're doing. They've got the ventilators ready. And when this virus begins to recede, then we have someone who can bring the economy back, we trust, because he's already proven that he could do that.
Well, Bob, this says a lot about you, that you could send an email to the White House and get a response within a day or two. God has positioned you very well. It's awesome. So back to, you answered part of this, but what do you think is going to happen in the 2020 elections? Do you think that the Democrats have exposed themselves to the point that there is going to be a backlash and that we are going to see a conservative tsunami in 2020?
Well, the pollster for Ronald Reagan told me one time, he said, I could sit on a South Sea island, and if you gave me 2 pieces of information, I could tell you who's going to win. He said, you get me the real growth, that's growth above inflation. You get me the real growth of the economy for the last 2 quarters, 3 months, the last 6 months before the election. And if it's 4% or above, the incumbent's going to win. If it's 2% or below, the incumbent's probably going to lose. And if it's between 2 and 4, then there'll be a battle. And that will depend upon the quality of the candidate. Quite frankly, I told that to Donald Trump when he was in office for about 6 or 8 weeks. I told him precisely that. And he has been concerned about making sure that the economy grew. For the first time in 20 years, Andrew, for the first time, the net worth, the average income of the average American was actually increasing. It had been flat. Let me just give you the actual figures. Under George Bush, the median income for a family of 4 went up $400 in 8 years. $400 in 8 years. Under Obama, in 8 years, it went up $1,200. So that's $1,600 in 16 years. That's $100 a year, which means it's absolutely flat. In the first 30 months of this president's administration, it went up $5,008. Wow. And so everyone felt a genuine improvement in their quality of living. Now, what we've seen is something we've never seen before. We've seen where the orders from the government was shut down the economy. We've never seen that. We didn't see it in wartime. We've never seen it before. I just got a report from I'll tell you, they're from the Fifth Third Bank, and they were doing an analysis, and they predicted in the next quarter, they expect unemployment to go to 30%. Now,
depression levels.
Unemployment to go to 50%. Let me take that back. Go to 50%. Unemployment during the Depression was 25%. And so they expect it to go to 50%, and they expect the economy to drop by 30%. So instead of being standard and going up 2 to 3 to 5% a year, what I just said, between 2 and 4 for the year, it will drop 30%. Now, we've never seen anything like that in history, and that's what we're looking at for the next 90 days. Now, for the next 30 days. Whether or not we can rapidly turn that around and put those people back to work, and answer to your question, what about November? Those final 2 to 3 months, what happens in August, September, and October will determine what happens in our country. And if the country still struggles, then people will look for change. But if we can put this train back on the track, then we can move on to the next 4 years of even more prosperity. And let me conclude with this. I'm somewhat of a political junkie. I actually enjoy this. My wife says that some people have a defective gene and it's incurable. You're born with it and there's nothing you can do about it. And so I watch on C-SPAN, I watch the town meetings of Klobuchar and Booker and Buttigieg and all these people. And every one of these people that were campaigning for president, they would all say this. They would say, if we lose this election, then everything that we've worked for these past 40 years will go up in smoke, will be destroyed. We will lose the progress that we've made for the last 40 years. So they recognize what's at risk. That we have a chance to take the world, as Winston Churchill said, back into sunlit uplands. We can put it back on and grow, or we can miss a chance of a lifetime and have their destruction come. So in answer to your question, I am optimistic. I'm hopeful. I believe that we can, but we can't be guaranteed until we see what is going on right at this moment, the impact that it will have down the line.
And last question before we take some questions from our viewers. I've seen a couple of polls that they actually put Biden ahead of Trump. Now, I know that all the polls were wrong in 2016, but where do they come up with these polls? I don't know anybody who would choose Biden over Trump.
Remember, I'm from Ohio, and so in 1984, I remember that in March of 1984, John Glenn the U.S. Senator from Ohio, was beating Ronald Reagan by 9 points. And so we're in March of this election year. And if this fella, so it's not unnatural that this happens on occasion. I will point out that his approval rating is about 2 points higher than Barack Obama was at this point in the election year. So I won't focus on that a whole lot. Polls can be maneuvered. They can poll a universe of people walking down the street, the people that can't tell you who the president of the United States was anyway, and they'll often say the Democrat Biden versus the Republican Donald Trump, and so they can distort any way that they want. I will just say this, that the Trump political campaign, their party says that they're well ahead. So we need to keep at it.
Amen. So let me just mention that you can go to bobmcewen.com if you would like to get any of his materials. And as Richard said, we have a link on our truthandliberty.net site to Politics Easy as Pie. And again, if you haven't seen that, I promise you it would be well worth the time. That's one of the best things I've ever heard in my life. So if you hadn't heard that, it's a must-see or a must-listen to, whichever.
Yes,
so
well, especially if you have children or grandchildren, and they're talking about socialism or the problems with America or whatever, and you're curious as to how do I respond? What makes America different? Yeah. Why is it that 4% of the population of the world has more books, more plays, more symphonies, more copyrights, more inventions than the rest of the world combined? What goes on here that's different? And if we can't articulate that, that's the purpose of Politics Easy as Pie. It's less than 45 minutes, and once you see it, you can't unlearn it. It'll be easily understood, and you can share it with your children or your grandchildren, and that's why it was made.
And I think you say it better than anybody I've ever heard. It's excellent.
Yeah, it is excellent.
So we got some questions.
Yes, sir. We've got a lot of questions coming in. Congressman, one of the questions is asking whether the $2.2 trillion stimulus plan, whether that is going to have long-term consequences that will hurt the United States because of the debt spending, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, let me just say that deficit spending is a very dangerous thing. And James Madison, the father of the Constitution, said that taxation is the power to destroy. That the power to tax is the power to destroy. So it has to be used very sparingly. So we know that we have to have taxes, but we have to be cautious about it. And in the same manner, when we spend more money than we have, and the way that you can cover it is you have to print more dollars. Now, what happens is that when the economy freezes up, as it did after the stock market crash in 1929, and they didn't know what to do about it. So what is happening right now at this moment is that if you run a restaurant and you're shut down, that means you've still got the payment for the grills, you've got the air conditioning payment, you've got the rental payment, you've got the property taxes, and you have nothing coming in. And so what do? Well, you have to be able to borrow money. That means that you need more cash. And then immediately after the Depression, after the stock market crash in 1929, they didn't understand that. And so as people couldn't get money, then they had to fold in. So what the Federal Reserve has done and what the president has done is to make money available. That is to say to banks, here we will back up loans that you want to make. And so when that business person comes and they ask for money, that you can't say we're out of money, because most banks don't keep money lying around. They lend it out. And so now when they get hit by this swoosh of demand for money, what do they do about it? And so the purpose of the spending bill and the deficit spending is to allow money to enter the system so that we can get over this hump. And quite frankly, that's what they did with some of the banks in 2009. And they took warrants. They took ownership of certain parts of it and said that now when you become prosperous, you have to buy these back. And the American taxpayer actually benefited from that experience. So a certain amount of that is going to happen here. And that's one. Now let's set that all aside. Now we're going to talk about economics as a whole. That is, economics, there are certain principles that cannot be changed. But there is also an impact that referred to by Adam Smith as animal spirits. That is the way that people react. And so you can't calculate precisely how an increase in taxes in Colorado is going to impact the economy, because it will impact different people different ways, and depending upon where they are in life and how much they need the money and that sort of thing. So that part cannot fully be calculated. And so I'll just give you a quick example. That is, it was 1984, and the national debt was rather significant. And David Stockman was the budget director, and he gave a presentation in which he pointed out that the amount of money from savings, if you took all the savings in America, and then you took the size of the national debt, that it would take 3/4 of all of the money that's saved in America just to pay for the shortfall in federal spending, which meant for the 1/4 would have to provide for cars and houses and businesses and all the rest, and there wouldn't be enough, and the economy would stumble and collapse. Well, the truth of the matter is that's not what happened, because as America was growing, everybody around the world wanted to invest in America. And as they sold the bonds, people in the world wanted to own the bonds. And in 1984, if you will go back and look, I believe that the gross domestic product was 7.2%, the largest it's ever been in my lifetime, before or since. So that's the part how people react. And so this deficit is dangerous. But one final conclusion, and we'll round third and finish it off. In 1941, America was in a depression. We were short of money. We had a deficit. And we got attacked by the Japanese. And America went to war. They began spending twice as much as the entire size of the economy before, a 200% increase in spending, began to borrow money larger than the entire economy. And you say, well, this is going to destroy everything. Well, it was necessary for the country to survive. And so right now, during this critical period, what we're doing is making sure that there's not a shortage, so that these dominoes don't begin to fall, that every business goes out of business. So we're making the money available, and we're going to see, I'll tell you 6-8 months from now, as to whether or not it was the right thing to do. I'll tell you it is the right thing to do. The question is how much damage it will do in the process. Yeah. And that remains to be seen.
We had a live stream last Wednesday with 2 of my friends on who are multimillionaires and stuff, and they've invested, since the bottom of the stock market, they've invested over $1 million in it, and they were confident that it is going to come roaring back, that we had a great economy, and this is an abnormal thing. It's not like a depression and stuff, and I think that it will. I think that. And if what you were saying was true, if the third quarter shows this economy roaring back, praise God, I'm believing Trump will come back in on a landslide.
Amen.
That'd be awesome.
Amen. Well, here's a really interesting question, Congressman. It is America's history as the freest and most prosperous nation on earth tied to its Christian heritage?
Well, there's no doubt about it. There's only 2 questions that all of us face in our lifetime. And that is, am I going to do things my way, or are we going to do things God's way? And man's way ends up in death and destruction. And God's way leads to life and prosperity.
That reminds me of a scripture. There is a way that seems right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death.
Amen.
Exactly. And what are the ways of death? Abortion, infanticide, euthanasia, right to die legislation, drug addiction, alcohol, death. But I am come that you might have life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. He that hath the Son hath life. And so it's a life and death struggle. In America, when it was founded, the founders said, we're going to base it not upon what man says. We're going to base it on what God says. And John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, the same was in the beginning with God. Next, all things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So there we have a series of synonyms. We have the flesh, which is Christ. We have the Word, which is God or Christ, and we have the Creator. They all mean the same thing. And so our founders said, they could have said, we hold these true to be self-evident. All men are endowed by Jesus Christ. Men are all endowed by the Word. Man is endowed by God. Man is endowed by his Creator. All means the same thing. So our rights don't come from the majority. Yep. They don't come from the court or from the Speaker of the House. They come from God. And what's the first one? It's life.
Yeah.
And I don't think the average person today realizes that. They really do see government as the one who dictates what's right and wrong, and that's not right. Let's have
And
another
if they
question.
do that, they don't have a commitment to be protected for life.
That's right.
You know, Dennis Prager says you can ask 2 questions and find all you need to know from a politician. And that is, if you want to know how he stands domestically, how he views, ask him where he stands on life. And if you want to know where he stands internationally, ask him where he stands on Israel. And from those 2 questions, you can answer virtually anything else you need to know.
That's right.
That's right. Well, that's fantastic. Well, we talked a little bit about socialism earlier in the broadcast. On the Democratic side, we see candidates for president now for the first time. We have an openly socialist candidate actually almost taking the nomination on that side. Does that increase that willingness for one of the major parties in our country to embrace socialism? Does that concern you? And what are your thoughts about that?
Very much so. Very much so. It wasn't that long ago, 6-8 years ago, that the worst thing you could do to a person to destroy their candidacy was to call them a socialist. Everybody ran from that. But now we have we have a whole percentage of the Congress that are proudly, they call it the Progressive Caucus, but they all are proudly socialists. And they don't like the free enterprise, American free enterprise system that created all this wealth. They want America to look like Venezuela. And they're proud about it, and they're getting elected, and the party is listening to them. Their party is.
Well, you had mentioned, maybe we were, before we got on the air, or maybe it was early, but you mentioned about one of the greatest problems we have today in our country is our system of higher education. Do you think that our education system is to blame for this increase in the popularity of socialism, and what can we do about it?
Well, as you know, what is wisdom? What is knowledge? The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So you can't start on what this person says, because this person will tell you that 5'6", 250-pound man is a woman if he doesn't know God. When you do away with God, there's no frame of reference. Anything can go haywire. The person that is wiping out the two boys that are running as girls in the track and field meetings in meets in Connecticut. When they won the other day, they jumped up and gave chest bumps against each other because they beat all these girls. Now let me just tell you, women don't do chest bumps. Men do chest bumps, and yet they because when you abandon God and you don't have the fear of the Lord. Now in every university every college you can think of, you think of Princeton, Brown, Columbia, Harvard, Yale, all of them have these beautiful chapels where they had every morning. They had religious services because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Now, when they did away with that, then they said people could freely choose, which is the transition point to where they reject it. And now they elect these people that is called diversity. Diversity means a person who doesn't doesn't like America. Many of them are around these poor parents are paying $100,000 and $150,000 a year, and to have these professors from foreign countries that know nothing about America except that they hate it, and they train these kids for this horrible nonsense, and they do more damage than good. They come home at Christmas time and they object to everything that they've been taught their entire lives. So what is happening now with this virus is that people are going online to learn. And when you have competition, when you have people, why should I pay some third world refugee $100,000 a year to teach economics when I can go online and get the finest economics professor in the world and listen to them? And so I think we're about to see some changes. They've already taken place in business. They've taken place in many places. The one place they haven't, and which the revolution is not taking place, is that they still have this 17th century model in higher education. And everyone is getting fed up with it. And I think it's one of the best things that can happen to America is when people get back to learning truth.
I saw a statistic that there's only like 5% of the American public that says that they're atheist. And yet in our universities, the percentage of professors is, I think, 30%, somewhere around there. Yeah. It's just disproportional, and that's the reason, exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Well, in politics, easy as pie, I talk about truth. And that is that the truth reveals error, so error hates truth. So as long as you're saying crazy, idiotic, dumb things, they'll listen to you. But if you present truth, brother, Satan comes up with a vengeance. And that's what we've seen on college campuses. You can't have a Bible-believing professor, because that one professor reveals error, and people they run from that. And so, of course, Christ said, "I am the truth." And so that's what. In order to get away from truth, you have to get rid of him. And I think we're rounding the corner on all of that. I'm optimistic about where we're.
I tell you, one of the most encouraging things to me is the court system. We have seen this thing just nearly inverted, flip-flopped, and Trump has appointed more federal judges, not only Supreme Court, but appellate courts and stuff. And I think that this is going to have an effect for generations to come. So there's some good things in the works.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got just a little bit of time left. Real quickly, Congressman, someone wants to know what you think the chances are of term limits being enacted for the United States Congress.
Well, I don't know. And let me just tell you that I am a strong opponent of term limits. I believe that this vast bureaucracy run by millions of people that don't have to answer to anybody, they make a regulation and go home at night and don't have to look anyone in the eye, that in that vast system, there's one little tiny peephole. There's only 500 people that represent us, only 500 people that have to listen to us. And if that person is mistreating us, such as what we heard today, in which the Food and Drug Administration doesn't respond because they don't care how many people die, because they don't run for office. So the only way that we can impact them is through the congressman or the senator. And the idea that they can only do a couple of years, and once they begin to figure all of this out, it takes you 3 years to figure out just the acronyms for all these various departments. And once you figure it out, that then you keep people turning over that could never figure out how to do it. That's the only input we have into that system. And so that principle, the idea that once you learn how to do something, you can't do it anymore, would it apply to a barber? Would it apply to a teacher, a nurse? Once you learn how to be a nurse, after 6 or 8 years, you can never be a nurse again. You'd never be a pastor. You'd never be a doctor again. That idea is so anti-intellectual that we believe they should be accountable. Yeah. And in the Congress of the United States, every 24 months, they have to put their name before the person and let the people decide. And every time we mess with our Constitution, we've not done good things. And
Congressman, I'm going to have to break in. We only got 50 seconds left. But
I'm sorry.
It has been awesome to have you with us. And again, please go to bobmcEwen.com and get his materials. You can go to Truth and Liberty and look up Politics Easy as Pie. I tell you what, you'll love it. It'll be awesome. Yeah. So thank you, Congressman, for being with us. We love you, and thank you for what you're doing. And thank all of you who joined us tonight. And remember, we do this every Monday night at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And we have on just some of the greatest guests, just like our congressman here tonight. So we would love to have you join us. Go to our website, truthandliberty.net. Check out all of these things. Join us next week for our next Truth and Liberty, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. God bless you.
Join us next time for the Truth and Liberty broadcast. Find tonight's episode and related articles and links at truthandliberty.net. Truth and Liberty is viewer supported. If you'd like to help us continue our live casts, you can make a donation at truthandliberty.net.